From the moment I stepped into the military gala, the same event I once attended with pride, confidence, and the unwavering bond of brotherhood, I felt a tension coil through me like a wire pulled too tight, because I knew my brother, Captain Ryan Hale, would be somewhere inside that shimmering hall, surrounded by polished medals, crisp uniforms, and the admiration he'd always effortlessly commanded. For years he'd mocked me, dismissed me, and treated my injury like a stain on our family legacy. And despite all the strength I had built after surviving the explosion that nearly took my life, facing him still made old wounds ache as if they had never healed. The glow of chandeliers, the quiet hum of military chatter, the clinking of glass, it all felt strangely distant, like I was walking through a memory that belonged to someone I used to be. I wasn't the soldier who ran into fire anymore. I was the man who limped into rooms and forced himself to appear whole, even when he didn't feel it. And as I took my first steps beneath the vaulted ceiling, past officers who remembered me as the fighter I once was, my heart hammered with a mix of dread and determination. I didn't come to impress anyone, not the crowd, not the generals, and especially not my brother. I came because a part of me still believed that healing required courage, and courage meant confronting the pain instead of hiding from it. Little did I know that this night, which I feared would break me all over again, would instead expose the truth behind years of bitterness, unravel my brother's carefully hidden grief, and change our relationship forever. From the moment I received the invitation to the military gala, a formal event I once attended with pride and certainty, I felt a strange disquiet growing in my chest, the kind that reminded me of the uneasy nights before deployment, when everything felt calm on the surface but turbulence churned underneath. And as the night of the event approached, I knew exactly why. My brother, Captain Ryan Hale, would be there. The same brother who had spent the last 2 years mocking me for leaving active duty after the explosion that changed my life. The same brother who once trained beside me, who once promised we would always fight shoulder to shoulder, but who now treated me like I had abandoned my purpose. And despite my attempts to brush off his words and pretend they didn't matter, they cut deeper than I ever admitted. Because losing my military identity had already shaken my world, and losing my brother's respect felt like losing the last surviving part of myself. Still, I arrived at the gala dressed in a suit instead of a uniform, my cane tucked discreetly under my arm, determined not to let my injury or my brother's judgment overshadow the night. Though even before I entered the hall, I could hear the laughter, the clinking of medals, the polished boots scraping lightly against the marble floor, and memories flooded back marching in formation. The weight of Kevlar, the adrenaline of missions, the quiet moments in the barracks sharing stories with teammates who became family, memories that now felt painfully distant, as though they belonged to someone else entirely. When I stepped inside, heads turned, some out of recognition, others out of pity, and though I tried not to look for my brother, my eyes found him almost instantly, standing tall in his decorated uniform, surrounded by officers who admired him, laughing in that confident, booming voice that once made me proud but now made me shrink internally. The moment he noticed me, his smile curved into something sharp, and before I could brace myself, he called out loudly enough for several tables to turn. "Stop acting like a nurse and get over here. Didn't think you'd actually show after quitting on us." And even though I forced a smile and pretended his words didn't sting, a familiar ache twisted in my chest, reminding me that while the explosion took part of my leg, my brother's coldness had taken something deeper, my sense of belonging. Ignoring him, I approached General Armin, the man whose steady hand once pinned a medal on my trembling uniform. As I lay in a hospital bed, fighting consciousness, and he welcomed me warmly, asking about my recovery and telling me I was braver than most still in uniform. But even his kindness couldn't silence the burning awareness of Ryan's mocking gaze drilling into my back. As the night continued, I moved through the room exchanging polite greetings, but every conversation felt distant, like a radio transmission cutting in and out, because part of me was still replaying the explosion, the deafening blast, the scorching heat, the way sand filled my mouth as I coughed for air, the ringing that drowned everything out, the fear that I was dying alone, And then the faint, desperate voice of my brother calling my name, pulling me back from the edge. It was the memory I clung to during my painful rehabilitation. The one that reminded me we were once inseparable. Yet now he acted like my survival had been an inconvenience to him, a reminder of something he didn't want to face. I tried to stay distracted, but then the lights dimmed, signaling the beginning of the tribute speeches, and I froze when I saw Ryan walking toward the stage, a glass in his hand, straightening his uniform with that familiar air of command. And my stomach sank because I feared he might embarrass me further, make a joke at my expense in front of people who still viewed me as a soldier even if the army no longer did. But when he spoke into the microphone, his voice lacked its usual steel, replaced by a rawness I hadn't heard since we were kids. And as he began by saying, "Tonight we honor heroes, real heroes," I felt my pulse spike, certain he was building up to another jab, but then he paused, swallowing hard, and continued. "And there's one person here tonight who has carried more pain, more weight, more courage than anyone I know." And for the first time, the room fell silent, not because of formality, but because something in his voice made everyone listen. I stood frozen as he began recounting our childhood, how we trained together in the backyard, pretending sticks were rifles and pretending courage was simple. The way we grew up dreaming of serving side by side. The way we idolized our father, who died in service long before either of us ever put on a uniform. And how we carried that torch into adulthood, becoming soldiers not because we had to, but because it felt like the only destiny we understood. Then he shifted, his voice trembling as he described the night of the explosion, how he saw the flash of light, heard me scream, raced toward the blast zone despite orders telling him to stay back, and how he carried me to the medevac with blood covering his hands, believing he was losing the only family he had left. He confessed that after Maya and Jerry, he didn't know how to handle his guilt, how he felt responsible because he believed the blast was meant for him, how seeing me in pain broke something in him that he didn't know how to fix. So instead of facing those emotions, he hid behind sarcasm, behind jokes, behind mocking comments that kept me at arm's length because caring hurt too much. And as he spoke, his voice cracked, and the confident, unshakable soldier I had always known suddenly looked human, fragile, and remorseful. By then, several officers and guests were wiping tears, and I stood rooted to the floor, my heart pounding as years of resentment, confusion, and heartbreak swirled violently inside me. Then he said the words that shattered the remaining walls around my heart. "My brother didn't quit, he survived. He sacrificed more than I ever have. He wears scars I'll never understand." And I mocked him because I didn't know how to say I was terrified of losing him. The room erupted in applause, but I barely heard it through the storm of emotion crashing through me. And when he stepped off the stage and walked toward me, every part of me wanted to look away, to protect myself from the vulnerability of the moment. But his eyes, wet, trembling, sincere, found mine, and for the first time in years, I saw not the soldier, not the critic, but my brother. When he reached me, he whispered, "I'm sorry. I should have been your support, not your enemy." And the apology hit harder than any insult ever had, because it was real, it was needed, and it was healing something I didn't realize was still bleeding. I didn't trust my voice, so I placed a hand on his shoulder, the same shoulder I once leaned on during long marches, the same shoulder that shook when we buried our father, and in that silent gesture, I forgave him. Not because the past didn't hurt, but because I wanted us to have a future. Afterward, we stepped outside for fresh air, and the chilly night breeze felt like a cleansing new beginning. The two of us standing there under the moonlit sky, not as captain and ex-sergeant, not as wounded and whole, not as disappointment and hero, but simply as brothers, rediscovering the bond that once carried us through everything. And as he nudged me playfully, saying, "Next year, you're coming with me, no excuses," I laughed a real, unguarded laugh and realized that the journey forward wouldn't be perfect, but it would be ours. And in that moment, I finally understood that sometimes the greatest battles are not fought on foreign soil, but inside the people we love. And the greatest victories are won when we choose forgiveness over pride, understanding over anger, and connection over silence. And as we walked toward the parking lot together, side by side once again, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, steady and warm, rising inside me like dawn breaking after a long and brutal night. In the end, that lonely Thanksgiving morning became the turning point of a lifetime. What began as heartbreak slowly transformed into clarity, strength, and a rediscovery of self-worth. I realized that love doesn't disappear just because others fail to give it back. And family isn't defined only by blood, it's defined by presence, respect, and effort. My son's choices hurt, but they also opened my eyes to the importance of valuing myself first. As I closed the door that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: peace. Sometimes being left behind is exactly what sets you free.